In this video, I'm going to show you how you can create this really awesome colored background animation inside of Adobe Premiere Pro. Before we do though, this video is sponsored by Motion Elements. More about them later on. So the first step is to actually make the gradient background, and then we'll create the shapes afterwards. So step one, we're going to go ahead to the new item button, go to black video, press OK, and we'll drag the black video onto video layer 1. Then we're just going to zoom in on the timeline by pressing the plus button on the keyboard, and we'll just extend that out to around 10 seconds or so. Now from here, we want to go into effects, search for 4 color gradient, but if you just type in 4, that should pop up at the bottom. So drag that onto black video, and then inside of 4 color gradient, we want to scroll to the very beginning of the clip. We'll go to color 1, select the yellow box, and you want to change this to a color of your choice. Now, to get this gradient effect to work, we want to have 4 colors that are similar, they're close to each other, but there is a level of contrast. So if we were doing an orange and pink color scheme, we would have a bright orange, a bright pink, a dark orange, and maybe somewhere in the middle. So we'll do that. We'll go for a peach color scheme. So let's go for a bright orange on color 1. Let's go for a slightly desaturated pink on color 2. Let's go for a pink on color 3, but I'll make it more of a purple. And then on color 4, we're going to go back towards the oranges, and we'll make that a brighter, lighter, less saturated orange. And we end up with this. So from here, we just need to increase the blend to blend that all together until you have this. And now if something doesn't look right here, so I feel like color 3 in my example might be too dark. And if that's the case, just go in and just make a change. So feel free to pull that around, make a change until you are happy. Now, from here, we are just going to animate the movement of these 4 points. So we'll go to point 1, create a brand new keyframe on the keyframe, point 2, point 3, point 4. Now you can also animate the color to change over time as well. So if we create a brand new keyframe on color 1, color 2, color 3, and color 4, then we go over to 5 seconds, we can click point 1 and these 4 points will appear. We're then just going to move these points around to different spaces, and you'll see that when we play this back, these are now animating. You'll see this nice animation appear. Now you just want to zoom in to those points. So the second set of keyframes, hover over those, and now we're going to change the color. So we're going to keep it within that kind of color scheme, but we're going to shift it slightly more towards the blues. So color 1 can become a red. Color 2, I'm going to shift more to the blue. So we're getting that blue coming through there. Color 3 can go blue again, but I'm going to make that a little darker. And then color 4, we can maybe make that a lighter version of that orange or that red. And we end up with this. Now I feel like color 1 might be a little too red. It's standing out just a bit too much. So I'm just going to brighten that up a little bit. And we end up with that. So when we play this back, you can see we've got this nice subtle gradient animation now happening. Of course, though, it does stop at the 5-second mark. So if you have a video which is a minute long, for example, then all you would do is just highlight all of those keyframes. We'll go Command and C on Mac or Control and C on Windows. Then we'll move over to the 10-second mark or somewhere around there, and we'll go Command or Control V. Then we'll copy all of those and we'll do the same thing again. And we'll just work through until we've got keyframes covering the entire duration of the clip. Now this gets quicker and easier the longer that you do it because you're copying and pasting more keyframes at a time. So adding keyframes to a 1 hour long video isn't actually going to take that long because they're duplicating every single time. Before we carry on with this video, I first just want to take a very brief moment to talk about Motion Elements. Motion Elements is an online marketplace for stock video, Adobe After Effects and Adobe Premiere Pro templates, title sequences, animations. There's so much for you to love there. And Motion Elements and I have teamed up for 1 year. They are the channel sponsor, so they are giving you an exclusive 70% off your first month when you subscribe. So if you want to speed up your editing and create amazing graphics in next to no time, then please consider checking out Motion Elements. The link is in the description below. Now, back to the video. So now we have the basis of our background animation. This is just our basic gradient animation. It looks really nice, but the point of this tutorial is to create the shapes. So to do that, we'll go on to either the pen tool, or we can go down into the rectangle tool. I'm going to drag that down to reveal the ellipse tool, and I'm just going to draw a circle. So now once you've done that, you want to go into Effect Controls, go to the Shape layer, and you can make this a solid if you want, but I do quite like the idea of having a stroke, so just a border. So we'll turn off the fill, turn on the stroke, we'll increase the size of that stroke, and don't worry too much for now about the color of it because we're going to copy the gradient animation effect onto these circles and these shapes. So once you're happy with that, just move the position of that down. So grab the selection tool or just press V on the keyboard, drag that down until you are happy with the look of that. Now feel free to adjust the scale if you need and move this around. But once you're happy with that, we can now proceed to the next point. So to do that, we are just going to go to the 4-color gradient effect on the background. We'll go Command C or Control C to copy and then paste onto the circle and it disappears. And that's because it has the exact same properties as the background. So in order to account for that, we are just going to into effects, search for change color, drag that onto the graphic layer. We can use the color to change. So select the eyedropper tool, select any color here. Then we are just going to increase the matching tolerance all the way up to 100. We'll pull the softness up and now we can just move the hue transform around. Or alternatively, you can move the lightness transform, you can move the saturation transform, but the whole point of doing this is to be really subtle. So you don't want to go for something really dramatic like this because that's really ugly. You want it to be very subtle. So you just about want to see that starting to appear. So keep these numbers very small. So I'm going to keep the hue transform at 0, the lightness transform at maybe 7 or 8, and then the saturation, I'm going to keep that quite low as well. I'll keep that at 7. So this is before and this is after. So it's just appearing. But because we've copied the keyframes, you can see that's still going to animate. Now, the next thing we want to do is to add a nice drop shadow to this just to bring it out from the background a little. So let's go into effects, search for drop shadow, and that should be under perspective. I have a few more drop shadows here because I've got a few plugins from a different company, but it should be under perspective. That's the one we are looking for. So we'll drop that onto the graphic, go into the drop shadow, and from there we are just going to increase the opacity for now. We'll increase the distance just so we can see what we're working with, and then we can increase the softness. And this is the thing that's going to really bring this to life. So increase that softness up to a nice high number, somewhere in the 500, 600, 700 region. And then we can pull the distance back down to 0 and we can adjust the opacity. So we just want this to be very subtle. We don't want it to be really loud and obvious. We want it to be very subtle. And you can see, even if I turn the change color off, you can see it is making a nice difference just having that drop shadow there. So at this moment in time, this is what we have. At the moment, you can see not the prettiest thing in the world, but there are different layers that we need to add up to create a more well thought out background. So I'm going to use this circle as a basis of this animation. So I'm just going to make a few copies of that. So I'm going to go Command C, move over, Command VV. So I've got 2 copies. This first layer, I'm just going to increase the scale and I'm going to move that into the corner. Now at the very beginning, I'm just going to create a brand new keyframe on position. I'll go towards the 10-second mark. I'm just going to focus on the first 10 seconds here. And I'm just going to move that position over to the right. So it's slowly animating in. So if we play this back, you can see that's slowly starting to animate in. And we can do the same thing for the other graphics as well. So we'll drag that on top. Go to the beginning, we'll move this to somewhere different. I'm going to make this one a lot smaller actually. Place that in the corner, brand new keyframe on position at the beginning, and we'll go to the rough 10-second mark and we'll just move the position of that as well. Now I'm just going to grab the third circle and I'm just going to place that underneath the one in the top left. So I'm just going to make sure that it's underneath. Then I'll move the position over to the left as well. So there's this nice overlap. And same thing again, we'll go to the very beginning, brand new keyframe on position, and I'm also going to animate the scale this time. Then we'll go to around the 10-second mark and we will move the position to the right. We'll decrease the scale and we end up with this. So very, very subtle. Now we can keep building elements on top of this. So if we go into the ellipse tool, we can go to the rectangle tool and we can draw a rectangle and we could place the rectangle, let's say in the bottom right. We'll copy the elements, so the drop shadow, the change color and the 4-color gradient from the circle, place that onto the rectangle. Now you'll notice that is how this looks. So you can now go ahead and animate this on as well, or you could just leave it as a static object. You could go into the free draw Bezier tool and you could draw some lines across the screen like this. Obviously, we would need to decrease the stroke width because that is ridiculously large at the moment. But then same deal, we would copy the drop shadow, change color, and 4-color gradient from the circle or the rectangle, paste that onto the line graphic, drag that to the very beginning. And as you can see, that is how this looks. Now, you would probably need to move this into the bottom right or the bottom left, or move this somewhere where it's less in the way. But as you can see, by creating a gradient animation and then adding just a few different shape layers on top, animating those shape layers and applying the color from the background onto these shape layers, we have created a really interesting background. And if we really wanted to, we could nest everything. So we'll highlight everything, right click, nest. We could call this background or whatever you fancy. Go into effects and search for blur. That should load up a whole selection of different blurs, but we're going to look at Gaussian blur or the Gaussian blur. Increase the blurriness up. So as you can see, those edges are going to be less defined and less distracting. So you could go for this option. Or alternatively, if we zoom out a little, so let's go to 50. If you select the free draw Bezier tool again, you could actually draw a custom mask. So you could do this. Select inverted, increase the feathering. So you can see it blurs off on the corners, but they start to come into focus the closer they get into the center of the frame. So from this point, all I would do now is just add some text. So we'll go to the T icon, which is the type tool. Type out a word or phrase of your choice. We'll go into the effect controls window. We'll change the font of the text. You can increase the weight of this, increase the size, center align this, left align. Do what you fancy with this. But essentially, once you've added your text, you'll end up with something like this. Now, of course, you could animate the text to scale in, so you could add a keyframe on the scale and increase that over time. You could maybe turn off the fill and create a stroke text instead if you wanted to. That might be a little bit more stylish. There are so many different things that you can do with this effect, and you can get really creative. You can add distortions, you can add loads of different things onto this. You could change the colors, add different shapes. The world is your oyster with this effect. And this is a really fun way of creating title cards, animations, title slides, and lyric videos as well. So thank you ever so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate your support, and hopefully I will see you on the next video. See you there.